Well, it's time for yet another installment of Don't Be Like Mike. And as I was thinking about which story to relate this time, I thought I would use up the stories that I exploit my cousin for. My cousin Mike, like I said, is not a guy whom I want to pick on too much because I like the guy. But his mental processes at times have been questionable, but it wasn't because of alcohol, like many of us have had questionable choices in the past due to that particular factor, perhaps. His questionable mental processes were always derived from there being something askew with his mental processes. He's in no way, shape, or form like the other Mikes I will describe in the books. But my cousin Mike still makes interesting decisions and has an interesting way of following through on those decisions. What I can tell you about this particular incident is that it is called Crab Foo Mike. Now, the interesting thing for this is that this story was written almost 5 years ago, and then I was listening to the radio. It's unpublished at this point of time, about 2 years ago, and I listened to sports talk radio, and here it is 7:10 a.m. ESPN Seattle, and the show that I was listening to that particular day was the Bob and Garage show that occurs around noon, I believe, because I think it was lunch hour sitting in the car. So you can imagine I'm sitting there and I'm listening to this, and then they have on an odd character named John Moffat, who is the former offensive lineman for the Seattle Seahawks. And John is an interesting guy, and he's a little bit of an odd duck, and to each their own. He's not quite Mike-like, but he's definitely different. And they began to describe what he would call his preferred fighting style. It's not kung fu, it's not karate, he called it crab fu. And the way he described it was very much the way that I described my story. So I'm going to, even though I wrote it first, I'm going to give him some credit, because I think that he developed the title for his particular type of martial art, not based on my material, but I believe it was a thing of genius that happened because just like in Revenge of the Nerds 2, when Booger found his sensei, his master, in that hotel, I believe that John Moffat saw my cousin Mike practicing his Crab Fu, and that he began to follow the Zen master Mike. And so I believe that says what happened. And so what I'm going to do is explain to you that I didn't mind being with Mike and doing things with Mike on a limited basis, because Mike could be a lot of fun, because he would do crazy things, say crazy things, and be willing to do things that you wouldn't be willing to do, so you could have him do them. That was the kind of relationship you wanted as a kid. You wanted one odd duck friend who would do things like that. And so when I was at my grandparents' and he happened to be there too, usually it was something that I didn't really feel that bad about. I was actually kind of happy. I mean, he had blown himself up in front of me at once. The guy was great. So on this particular time, though, it was not something that I looked forward to, because we got to Grandpa and Grandma's, and it was one of those beautiful days in Western Washington. Those days where it's raining cats, dogs, there might be a pig or a cow or a horse coming down. It was one of those days. So it was an indoor day. It meant I couldn't escape Mike if I wanted to. I was stuck with him in the confines of a living room. That's not where you want to be with a Mike all day long. It's just not where you want to be. Because then Mike's idiosyncrasies and odd habits begin to unleash themselves upon you. So, as Mike would pick at his scabs, his nose, and other bodily orifices and things like that, I won't go into details, your imagination can go for you. And that was pretty gross. And then when he actually touched me, I felt really gross and dirty. Let's just put it this way. If I had a tub of hand sanitizer to jump in, I would have done it. And so, I let Mike know in no uncertain terms that I didn't appreciate it. I believe I punched him in the arm quite hard and told him to get the blank away from me. So he did, begrudgingly and angrily, and he disappeared back into the back bedroom. So I sat there and I started reading again. And then Mike came back in. Now, I want you to picture this. I think I have described Mike before as, at this point in time, Mike was a very skinny and scrawny kid. He was pasty white, had that red curly hair, and he had this awful smile. He made Alfred E. Newman's smile look like something to be cherished. So he had that smiling, grinning look on his face. He came back out of the bedroom wearing that smiling, grinning, icky face of his, and he was wearing a pair of tighty whities and a wife beater t-shirt. He had the wife beater t-shirt tucked into said tighty whities. So Mike looked quite odd. Yes, Mike looked odd indeed. I wish you could jump into my memory banks and into my mind and see the picture that I am now seeing, because there's no way I could describe it in all of its detail and still capture how funny it was. So just try to think about the funniest thing you've ever seen with your two eyes and imagine this about 10 times funnier. Because he had come out wanting to be a wrestler. So you have the ultra skinny, ultra pasty white dude wearing tighty whities and a wife beater t-shirt, wanting to flex and wanting to wrestle me. I was only 2 years older than Mike, and I wasn't a whole heck of a lot bigger than him, but I was quite confident that he would be no problem. The problem was I still didn't want to touch him because I could still remember him picking and touching, and it was still grossing me out. So I basically flashed him on, told him to get lost. I didn't want to wrestle. So instead of him taking no for an answer, he began to strut around, and then he would come by and he would push me in the head or push me in the shoulder, trying to induce me into a fight. And so eventually it happened. I decided that I would get up and fight him. But he looked so funny that when I actually did, I started laughing, and I almost doubled over. And so this hurt poor Mike's feelings. I bet you didn't know this, but Mike does have feelings. And in this instance, they were hurt. He was wounded and fouled. And so he proceeded to kick me. Now, where he kicked me was the impetus for the rest of the story and the reason that he developed his particular fighting style. Because you should never kick another man in his private area. It's taboo. No. Don't do it. Not even if you're a Mike. I want that to be understood. That's just not cool. And so as I was there on the ground, writhing in pain, the wrestler Mike jumped on my back and wanted to try to pin me to the ground. So I'm trying to recover some semblance of decorum. I'm also trying not to become so angry that I turn green and begin to rip out of my clothes and smash him into 1,000 pieces. That's not easy for me because at that point in time I was very much like my father. I was an uncontrolled ball of raging rage. Imagine that, raging rage. I was not good at controlling my temper. Let's say it that way. When you get older and you have kids and eventually grandkids, you'll do like I did. You will mellow. You will become better at controlling your anger, and you will become even better at laughing at yourself. But until then, you may have the same problem I did. And so by the time I regained the ability to stand and to get on the offensive, Mike was in trouble. I punched him once in the shoulder, and he said ow and kind of cried and stepped back. And then I went for him because what I was going to do was, since he wanted to wrestle, I was going to do the kind of thing I had seen in WWF. I was going to give him a suplex or whatever they call it, where you put his head in, grab his shorts and you flip them over backwards. That's what I was going to do. That was my complete intent. But when I got to the point where I had a hold of his tidy whities and I had a hold of his head but I hadn't put it under my arm yet, I thought to myself, a very bad thought. I thought, nuclear wedgie. It's something you hear about. It's this mythical thing, but you've never seen one before, and I wanted to see it. And Mike had induced enough rage and anger in me that it would be easy. And in fact it was. I pushed his head down towards the leg hole of his underwear and pulled up on his leg hole, and he just went slump, and there he was. He was completely, his head stuck through the leg hole of his underwear, and as he kept on trying to raise up to get out of this predicament, he would just about cut himself in half with every time he tried to raise up. And then he couldn't think of the fact that he should probably pull it off his head or anything else. He didn't even try. He just started crying and getting mad and turning red, and it was hilarious. It was so funny that the rage that I had built up left. It went away because I was laughing again. Here he was, bent over with his head through his leg hole. His legs were now spread wide, and his arms out like this, and he was flailing about like some moron trying to, get me. And so I just stayed away from him in the living room of the house, let him smack himself against the table, the TV, the couch, whatever he hit. I just laughed because he had no coordination or control. And then all of a sudden he stopped crying. Well, when Mike stops crying, you know that he's gone mad to a new level. The level that Mike had gone mad to at this point when he stopped crying was a level of revenge, where he wanted payback. He was going to do whatever he could to get it. And so he organized himself and he learned to crab walk. This is where I believe Mike must have been doing this on his back deck. A couple decades later, John Moffat saw this, and this is what induced John Moffat to say, hey, I should pick up this as a fighting style. Look how coordinated this guy is doing that crab walk and punching things. This guy is awesome. I want to be that guy. It's not something that a normal person would think, but maybe John Moffat did. But here we have Mike anyway doing this. He is now coming at me in a very organized, quiet, non-crying way, and so I knew that he was for real. And then I just thought to myself, well, he looks like a crab, walking sideways like that, and I wonder if, like a crab, I could flip him over on his back and subdue him. And so I did. I just flipped him over. And there went Mike. Boom, boom. And there he was, arms and legs flailing, with him stuck on the ground, with his head stuck in the same hole in his underwear as his leg. And that is what crab fu is all about. It is sure a fine way to practice kung fu, or a martial art, if you will, if you like. I won't personally practice it, because in order to practice it you have to be given a nuclear wedgie, and it's not something that I'm looking forward to ever experiencing, and I can't see how I would get my head all the way through the leg of my boxer briefs to do it in the first place. So if, from that particular aspect, it's technologically too challenging for me to even try, so I'm not going to, along with a lot of other reasons. But that is the reality of it. That is how crab fu was developed by my cousin Mike. And of course we will allow John Moffat to have the name of it, to coin it, as it were. And so the one thing that I would ask is, if Bob and Draws ever do see this video, please ask John Moffat to submit a picture or a video of himself in full-on crab fu mode, doing it old school style like Mike did. If he can do that, you guys need to get him on the program to do a demo or something, now that you're on video. So anyway, that's my idea for something fun to happen on the Bob Groz, and I guess it's now Tom's show. So guys, think about it. You're probably not going to do it, but if you do, I will watch it, along with many others probably. Although I don't know where John Moffat is anymore. He might be locked up or in an insane asylum, I don't know. So anyhow, all those things being possible, but none of them probably being true. So here we have, of course, Mikey committing crab fu. The one thing about crab foo is you can see that if you just flip them over, there's no defense from that in crab foo, so I wouldn't recommend it as a preferred fighting style. You might want to use aspects of it at times, but I wouldn't make it your main bag of tricks there. Alright? So anyway, happy crab fooing to you.